The story begins in the early 80s, in a suburban area of Stockholm. One day, Oskar, a 12-year-old scrawny boy who often imagines fighting off his bullies, sees an older man and a girl move into one of the apartments in his building, but doesn't think much of it. The next day at school, he correctly answers a question his teacher asks, showing he's a bright kid who reads a lot, but that only gets him targeted by Connie, who calls him a smart pig. Later that night, Håkan, the new neighbor, sets out with a knife, a container, and a bottle of halothane. He finds an unlucky boy, sedates him, then ties him upside down under a tree and unalives him, collecting his blood in a container. But before he can finish, a dog shows up, so when the dog's owners come looking, he has no choice but to flee. That same night, Oskar goes out to a nearby tree to vent his anger with his knife after another rough day. Suddenly, Eli, a strange girl, calls out to him. Apparently, she's his new neighbor.
Inget.
When he asks what Oskar is up to, he composes himself and says nothing. After that, Eli reveals that she lives next door to him, but before she leaves, she tells him flatly that they cannot be friends. At the same time, Håkan takes a bus home. But before getting off, he checks his bag and realizes he left the keg of blood behind. Frustrated, he returns home to face Eli, who throws a fit over his mistake, and he is forced to apologize. The following day, news of the murdered boy spreads around town. The students are advised to speak with the school counselor, but Connie makes an insensitive joke about the case. After class, Oskar hides in the bathroom from Connie and the rest of the bullies until he manages to sneak away and head home. The moment he gets home, he reads a newspaper and learns about Morse code and how it was used during the war. At a local diner, a group of friends gather to discuss the new government policies. They spot Håkan, the newcomer, sitting alone and try to include him in the conversation so he won't feel left out, but he pays his bill quickly and excuses himself. At night, Oskar chills outside playing with a Rubik's Cube until Eli joins him, watching him closely. When Oskar tells her about the cube and lets her try it, she says she won't be coming by tomorrow. But Oskar insists she return it the day after, and she agrees. She asks for tips, and once he shows her the basics, she starts trying to solve it. Oskar notices that she's not dressed warmly for the snow, and that she smells strange. When he asks about it, she says she's forgotten how to feel cold. He heads back inside, but as soon as he's out of sight, her hunger pangs kick in. Later that night, Yaki sees Eli pretending to be in distress under a bridge and tries to help her, but she attacks him, drains his blood, and unalives him. Gosta, Yaka's acquaintance, witnesses all of this, and right after the incident, Håkan rushes to move Jaki's body before Gosta can alert anyone. Coincidentally, the people Gosta runs to for help are the same ones who had earlier tried to talk to Håkan. By the time they reach the crime scene, all they find are faint traces of blood buried in the snow. Meanwhile, Håkan struggles with Jaki's corpse, and once he gets to a river downhill, he tosses the body in and makes sure it sinks beneath the ice. The next morning, Oskar heads out to the front yard and finds that the Rubik's Cube has been completely solved, so he gets more interested in the puzzle and even tries to solve it during school hours. So at night, he rushes outside to meet Eli and asks how she figured it out.
12. Ungefär.
But first, Eli asks to confirm if she smells better, and then Oskar asks for her name and age. She tells him she's the same age, but her answer is vague. When he asks for her birthday, she says she doesn't know. Oskar starts getting confused and asks about her parents, but sensing how sensitive the topic is, he switches and asks if she's ever gotten a present.
Jag vet inte.
Because she says no, he offers her the Rubik's Cube as a gift, but she turns him down and instead shows him how to solve it. As she demonstrates, Oskar's interest in her deepens. So the next day after school, Oskar stays behind to draft out a Morse code chart to teach Eli later. But as soon as he leaves the school building, Connie and his gang ambush him. They demand to see what he wrote down. One boy hits him repeatedly with a stick, and another smacks his face with it, leaving a mark, and they flee immediately right after. When Oskar gets home, he lies to his mom, saying he tripped on a rock. Later that night, he teaches Eli Morse code, and she notices the wound on his cheek. When she learns it was caused by bullies, she tells him he should fight back. even if they outnumber him. Her advice is to hit them back until they don't dare attack him anymore.
Men de är 3 stycken. Du får slå ännu hårdare.
Oscar worries they'll retaliate, but Eli assures him that she'll help. Feeling reassured, Oscar takes her indoors to test their Morse code system, and they try it out together. Motivated by her advice, Oscar asks the school coach if he can join the weightlifting program to build some strength and better defend himself. The coach agrees and tells him to come by later that evening. One night, Oscar buys a snack from a restaurant and offers it to Eli. She refuses at first, but then takes a bite to avoid seeming rude, only to vomit it all out in a nearby alley. She apologizes, but he hugs her, and she realizes that he likes her. Curious, she asks if he does, and if it's because of her gender, but Oscar tells her he'd hit on anything that has holes. The following week, Oscar goes to visit his dad, who lives separately from his mom. He spends time with him and picks up one of his dad's sweaters and a gift box. During this time, Håkan tells Eli to stop seeing Oscar and prepares to go out and get more blood for her. He passes by the gym and notices a group of boys playing basketball. Eventually, he finds a target and begins the extraction process, tying the boy upside down. But just as he starts, the victim's friends show up, forcing Håkan to hide. They rescue the boy, and in a desperate move to avoid being identified and traced back to Eli, Håkan pours acid on his own face and becomes pretty. As time passes, Oscar has steadily begun training under the coach to gain weight. One day after training, he finds that someone has soaked his pants in the urinal, so he has to walk home, in the freezing cold, wearing just his jorts. Meanwhile, Eli sits idly at home, but then hears on the news about a man who was arrested after a failed murder attempt. The suspect had inflicted severe injuries on himself and couldn't be identified. Putting the pieces together, Eli realizes it must be Håkan. She rushes to the hospital and speaks with a nurse, not giving Håkan's name, but instead saying the police brought her dad in.
Polisen tog honom.
The nurse explains he's on the upper floor in a restricted room and offers to call the police to help her see him. Eli politely declines and leaves. Concerned by Eli's fragile state, the nurse steps outside to look for her. Unknown to the nurse, Eli has already scaled the hospital wall and is climbing up to the 7th floor, where Håkan is. When she gets there, she sees Håkan's terrible condition, but he still manages to open the window for her. Knowing she hasn't eaten and wanting to help one last time, Håkan disconnects himself from life support and offers his blood to her. Eli feeds, and after she's done, his corpse falls out the window. She escapes before anyone can spot her. That same night, Lake, one of Yaki's friends, lies awake, disturbed by the news that a child was responsible for Yaki's death. He always knew Yake was a good man, so he swears to take revenge. As for Eli, she goes to Oscar's window and asks to come in. Once he lets her in, she undresses and gets under the blanket with him. Oscar notices how cold she is, but he doesn't seem to mind. Then another thought hits him, and he asks if she wants to be his girlfriend. Then Eli hits him with the, "I'm not a girl," but Oscar says he doesn't care. When Eli confirms that things between them won't change if they're dating, she agrees, and Oscar's overjoyed, so he falls asleep holding her hand. Early the next morning, Oscar wakes up to find that Eli is gone, but she's left him a message. Later, the students go on a field trip to a frozen lake for skating. As usual, Oscar's bullies threaten to throw him into the water if he dares to join in, but this time, he decides to go anyway. He spots a stick nearby and picks it up. As soon as Connie sees him, he charges, threatening to push Oscar into the icy lake. But unlike before, Oscar wakes that dog in him and stands his ground. Their instructor, distracted with supervising younger kids nearby, doesn't notice the tension rising. Connie repeats his threat and proceeds to attack, but Oscar swings the stick and smacks him hard. Connie screams as blood gushes from his left ear, but despite that, Oscar feels a rush of triumph as he finally fights back. At the same time, some kindergarten kids who have the instructor's attention start yelling, since they've spotted a corpse beneath the ice. The instructor quickly calls off the trip and notifies an excavation team to recover the body. Later that evening, Oscar hears his mom arguing with his dad over what he did to his classmates, but Oscar doesn't feel any remorse. When he finally speaks to his dad, they end up talking about something completely unrelated. One day during swimming practice, one of Connie's lackeys tries to talk to Oskar, not realizing that Eli is watching them from a distance. After the session, Oskar takes Eli to one of the empty rooms in their building so they can talk in private. There, he tells her about how he stood up to Connie, and she praises him for it. The room starts to feel cozy, and in the heat of the moment, Oskar cuts his hand with a knife, hoping to share his blood with Eli as a bond.
Det är ju inte alls ont.
But the moment Eli sees the blood, she realizes that he's cooked, and instinctively drops to the floor to taste it. However, as she sees that she's at risk of hurting him, she yells at him to run before it's too late. Then she bolts and climbs up a nearby tree to get away. Elsewhere, Jockey's friends meet at Gosta's place and try to convince him to report what he saw to the police. But Gosta, a cat lover who hates interrogation, resists. Lake, still mourning Jockey, gets into an argument with his girlfriend, Ginja. She storms out in anger, and after realizing he was out of line, Laka follows her. Outside, while trying to get away from him, Ginja is attacked by Eli, but Laki arrives just in time and kicks Eli off of her, saving Ginja's life. But when Ginja wakes up the following day, her skin begins to burn under sunlight. That weekend, Oskar goes to visit his dad, and they spend some time playing around, but their fun is cut short when a visitor arrives. And his dad splits his attention. Feeling left out, Oskar later hitches a ride back home. Meanwhile, Ginja's thirst for blood begins to grow, so she ends up visiting Gosta's place, where she also finds Laki, who has been searching for her. Then something strange happens. Ginja notices all of Gosta's cats hissing and sneering at her. When she tries to leave, Laka stops her to ask where she's been. Suddenly, the cats attack her, forcing her to flee. But on the way, she stumbles and is eventually rushed to the hospital. That night, Oskar returns home and taps a Morse code message on Eli's door to let her know it's him. He notices a strange smell coming from her apartment and follows it, but she closes the door between them. When he asks if she's a vampire and she admits it, he asks if she's dead, and she says no, but reveals that she's been 12 for a very long time. She then invites him in and shows him an egg, explaining that it's as valuable as a nuclear power plant. Oskar wanders around her place a bit, but eventually says he has to go, since he plans to distribute flyers the next day. Eli offers him money, saying he doesn't need to work, but Oskar refuses, suspecting she got it from people she unalived. She tries to deny it, but he doesn't buy it. Instead, he politely excuses himself, and she lets him go. At the hospital, Laka tries to cheer Ginja up by showing her his dad's stamp collection, claiming it could be worth money, but Ginja couldn't care less. Struggling to keep her sanity, she tells Laka that Eli must have infected her, and that she doesn't want to go on living. That night, Oskar has a funny little standoff with his mom while they're brushing their teeth, showing how playful and silly she can be when she's in the mood. The next morning, Lake waits outside Ginja's hospital room as a doctor checks on her. When the doctor tries to take a blood sample, Ginja demands that he open the window blinds, and the moment he does, she screams in pain and bursts into flames. But before Lake rushes in, she is already a barbecued meat. Meanwhile, back at school, Oskar is playing with his friends when he spots Connie's older brother arriving. Not wanting to get caught in any more trouble, he quietly slips away before they can notice him. That evening, Eli visits Oskar's apartment.
Tja. Hej.
But he doesn't immediately permit her to enter. She asks him to say the words, but instead, he uses hand signals. This results in Eli bleeding profusely from her skin, forcing Oskar to stop the act and quickly say she can come in. Once inside, she sits quietly, and as they talk more, Eli tells Oskar that they aren't so different. She explains that he can unalive people if pushed to the edge, and she has no choice but to do it to survive. She pleads with him to try being like her, even if just for a little while. Since Oskar's mom isn't home, he decides to entertain Eli. He gives her some of his mother's clothes to wear, and as she changes, he accidentally sees her body and realizes that Eli is non-binary. But the moment is interrupted when his mom unexpectedly comes home. Oskar rushes Eli into his room, and she escapes through the window before she can be caught. Later that night, after his mom falls asleep, Oskar sneaks into Eli's apartment and spends the night there. The next morning, he finds a note from her, warning him not to check the bathroom because she's inside. Meanwhile, LUKA, still furious over Ginya's death, bursts into Eli's apartment looking for her. He searches the place and finally opens the bathroom door, discovering Eli fast asleep in the tub. He pulls out a knife to unalive her, but just then, Oskar, who had been secretly watching, shouts to alert Eli. In that brief moment of distraction, Eli awakens, leaps onto LUKA, and feeds on him before unaliving him. The commotion alerts a neighbor, and Eli realizes she can't stay there any longer. After the act, she thanks Oskar for saving her, and tells him she has to leave. Then she kisses him softly, before vanishing into the night. Later, LUKA's body is discovered, and when Oskar returns home, his mother yells at him. Grounded and heartbroken, he watches as Eli leaves the neighborhood. Time passes, and when he checks her apartment again, it's completely empty. Oskar becomes sad and lonely after Eli's departure, but he slowly comes to terms with her absence. So one day, he receives a phone call from Martin, one of Connie's lackeys, claiming that the school coach wants Oskar to show up at the pool. Trusting the lie, Oskar goes to the pool that evening. As he swims, Connie and his friends set a fire in the building, forcing the instructor to leave to attend to the emergency. With the coach gone, Connie, Jimmy, and the rest of the gang take over the pool area. Jimmy approaches Oskar and makes a cruel wager that if he can stay underwater for 3 minutes, he'll only nick him with a knife, but if not, he'll gouge out his eyes. Before Oskar can react, Jimmy grabs him and shoves his head underwater. As Oskar struggles for air, the gang starts to panic, especially Connie, who tries to stop Jimmy, but Jimmy refuses to let go. However, before Oskar can drown, body parts start flying into the pool, and one by one, the boys are taken down, including what's left of Jimmy, which falls into the pool. As for Oskar, someone familiar dives in and saves him. So when he opens his eyes, he sees Eli and becomes excited. Later, he hops on a train traveling far away, and beside him is a box that contains Eli. The two of them communicate silently, tapping out Morse code through the box walls. The end. Thank you for sticking to the end of my video. Please do me the biggest favor by leaving a like, comment, and subscribe. And I hope to see you in the next video.